All right. Well, welcome here, guys. Yeah. So looking forward to this. Cheri, thank you so much just for, your time is so valuable. Thank you for giving us a little piece of it.
Yeah.
And guys, thanks for joining us in the middle of your day. And Cheri, so the reason I had said to you, I have loved leading a pod with you, and I have seen how amazing you are and how you lead your team and the wisdom you give when it comes to conversations. And so the reason I said to the girls, we want to hear from Cheri because as you were explaining it in a different chat in our pot, and you were talking about making the shift in conversation, and you do that so gracefully. And I find one of the biggest things that we encounter, and probably what all of us hear, is I have this person, I'm just in a new conversation, or they've expressed interest. I don't know how to make the shift. How do I turn the conversation to kind of finding out if this is what they need? And I feel like that's probably how we all feel, that a lot of people get hung up right there in their business. So
Yes.
we are looking forward to hearing from you, and I'm just going to give you the total floor,
Okay.
just to kind of, share on what works for you and just your whole viewpoint on it, because I think it's amazing.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. It is very much an honor. I love this topic because it's something I've had to dig into a lot myself, largely just because I knew how to communicate with people face to face. But when it came to social media, it felt like I was kind of poking in the dark. I can't really see what they're thinking. I can't see their facial expressions and all this sort of stuff. So learning how to communicate on a social media platform was a challenge to me. And so I had to dig this all apart and be like, what is a conversation? How do people even talk? So there's a variety of things. The book, John Maxwell's book here, you probably have all read this book before, but in his The Law of Connection is where this is kind of validated. Everything I'm going to talk about, how he talks about how to connect with people, and an interesting part of connection with people is that you actually take them someplace. And that's actually one of the laws in connection. One of the steps of connecting is actually bringing someone someplace. So, okay, so you know how you're talking to somebody and you're chit-chatting, just having normal surface layer conversation that is natural to have when you first meet someone. It's kind of how you start feeling comfortable and getting comfortable. And then at some point, sometimes you happen to be in a deeper conversation, or somehow you're able to get into a good conversation where it's interesting, it's more meaty, it's more, I don't know, for me, I get really bored of chit chat. If all my chats are chit chatting, I'm like, how many times do I have to ask you if you had a good day today and what the weather's like? I don't know. It's like, this is boring. Anyway, so I love it when we actually get into a good conversation. Something that's unique to them, I guess, is what I mean by a conversation. So this was, I started learning about this. I did a Instagram course. And the guy in there, it was probably the biggest thing that I took away from him. He called it the DRDM, which was direct reach, direct message thing, the cheat sheet. And the cheat sheet he gave was kind of from his perspective. And so it was a little bit, I had to really work to translate into Plexus language, I guess. But basically the steps were, there was 7 steps to leading a conversation. So there was your regular wave, hello, which could be commenting on their posts, could be direct messaging them. That first time you kind of just show up, and it's normal to be like, hey. And then after that, it's kind of like the connection part, like the chit chat is like setting the tone for the conversation, how's your day and all those sorts of things. Those things are what most of us do easily. And then the next step is the rapport, which is where you talk about something. He called it the rapport. Basically, it's when you talk about a topic that you know the pain points of it. So for example, motherhood has pain points that we know Plexus helps with. So talking about motherhood can lead to needs that Plexus can fill. But the biggest thing that I always missed, I knew about finding pain points and, you know, looking for those, but the step that I didn't ever pick up on before was the need to talk about what they love first. Because if you don't talk about what they love first, you don't know if the pain point is something that they're going to have a priority to even solve. And the flow of this also, it's a very natural flow into that, because when you're helping someone fix a problem, there's got to be trust there, there's got to be connection, there's got to be so much there for them to be open to you stepping into that need, because it's a vulnerable place for them. So that's why it always seems awkward to, you know, be chit-chatting with someone and then, you know, all of a sudden be offering help. Sometimes it feels like there's a gap in there, and it's like, how do we get over that gap? And it's by talking about what they love. So an example of that would be, let's say a pain point would be being tired as a mom. It's a pretty normal pain point. It's pretty normal to chit chat about your kids when you meet a mom. That's very comfortable. You're like, hey, and you're like, you know, how's the school year going and stuff like that. And then it's easy to move into what you love about, let's say they're homeschooling, and let's say you homeschool as well. I'm just trying to create a conversation here. And I'm going to be just sharing how, yeah, I'm homeschooling too. And they're like, yeah, this is how we're doing it. And then I'm moving into what we love about it. So I'm going to start sharing why homeschooling is so important to me, and why am I going to invest my time here? Why is this such a big deal to me? And which helps, and I'll ask them, you know, what was it that got you homeschooling? And you're moving into this this why part of them, why they're doing what they're doing. And they're communicating that, and you're sharing your perspective as well, which that helps them lean in and share how they're feeling. Once you've identified and communicated why you're doing what you're doing, what you love about it, why it's so important to them or you, or, you know, maybe you both are on the same page on that, then it's very natural to move into, you know, one difficulty I have had is just feeling so tired. Like when the kids are reading to me in the afternoons, I just feel like I'm gonna fall asleep listening to them read or whatever, which is what my mom used to do. She'd fall asleep just reading to her in the afternoons. So, and then from there, you know, you sharing something, or you're moving into that pain point related to that. Does that kind of make sense of the flow of how that worked? So you started chit-chatting, you started talking with the kids, you started talking about why we're doing this with the kids, and then you pull up a difficulty that can be associated with that. And so it all ends up being in alignment with their priorities. So learning that was really powerful to me, both in working with potentials, but also working with my team as well, knowing how to, you know, I'm meeting a new level 2 of mine, you know, because I'll go and ask my level 1s, especially when I see them recruiting people. I'll be like, you know, who have you recruited? Tell me a bit about them. And I'll be asking them questions like, who do you think is most open to sharing and stuff like that? And I'll be like, I'd love to meet that person. You should connect us. And then we get in a 3-way chat. And then from the 3-way chat, for me, I always schedule a call, because I cannot have these conversations. Like when I'm actually trying to move a new person in my team, I always get on the phone with them if I can, like a Zoom. Otherwise I can't hear their heart. I can't pull things out because I can't hear what I'm needing to hear. That could be just me personally, but that's how I've learned that I have to work to be effective. And so I get on the Zoom with them and stuff, and so I'm finding out what brought them to Plexus. I'm finding out, and then I always bring up the income disclosure statement, and I'm like, okay, I have a question for you. If you were to dream, and let's just talk about dreams here. I word it the same way I do it in the meet and greet Zoom that we do. I do it exactly like that, because I found I used to just bring up the income disclosure statement and be like, what of these numbers stands out to you? And they would always pick silver. And I'm like, well, that's not dreaming. Like, we all can do that. So now I always say, so silver, when I went silver, that made it so I had a little extra room in my budget, or I was paying for my products. When I went gold, it made it so we could pay for the bigger bills because we were living paycheck to paycheck. But ruby is when my life was really changed. So I kind of give them that example of what I'm looking for. And I ask them what rank would actually change things for your family. So that wording I've found to be really important. I've been able to actually draw out of people, like, instead of just them thinking, oh, I could do that, it's more like what would actually change things. That's what I'm looking for. And then we kind of go off on this tangent. To them, they probably think we're going off into a tangent, but to me, it's not. It's really important. So I've had people say things like, well, if I was Ruby, we'd be able to put an addition on our house. And so I go way off onto this whole dream of an addition on their house, and I find out they're a mother of 12 living in this tiny house, and I'm like, oh, this is like a need. This is like really, really important. So we go off talking about that. And then after I feel like I've like got a really good idea of how important this is, we're not talking about Plexus, we're just talking about this need that they have and how long they've lived in that house. And I just like pull out this whole need. And then I swing back and be like, okay, so we're just kind of dreaming there, but just if you were Ruby, like this would be really important and really big for you. Then I can be like, well, we start at silver. And so then we kind of pull it back to like a plan and a goal and stuff like that. And so back to what I was talking about before, whenever I can, I try to find out what they really love in life and what they do, and then bring in things in alignment with that. But what I also wanted to mention with all of this, so if you're on Instagram or Facebook and you're chatting with brand new people that you don't know, I always have this understanding of how to lead the conversation in my mind. But I will use that. Sometimes I'll drip Plexus on people, kind of like I'll offer a sample to them. I will just bring up that I do Plexus or whatever. I kind of drip it, but I'm not trying to share it. I'm just kind of like dripping it so that they kind of start having awareness of it. So it's not like I don't drip Plexus and I like try to hide Plexus before I've had this conversation. But what I've found is sometimes I'll be dripping Plexus. I'll even have them sampling Plexus, but I can't seem to move them into action, because even though I've shared Plexus with them, or sometimes I've even had them taken the product, but I haven't really got their heart yet. And so this conversation is something that you can use after they've signed up, before they've signed up. When you first met them, I'm always looking for being able to lead that conversation. And sometimes you get to a need that didn't, like I'll be sharing something and you can tell they're just not really connecting there. And I just feel like this is really important because we have all the systems. Plexus gives us all the systems. I use all the systems. If you listen to, I'm sure you guys have done the momentum movement, or some of you have, where they kind of lay out the systems maybe a little bit more detailed or specific, or just kind of explaining them a bit more, things like that. There's the frog, the frog thing. I don't know if you've all heard them talk about the frog thing about, if you look at every ambassador as a frog, our goal is to get them into a jacuzzi in Maui. But if you just drop them into the jacuzzi, they jump out because they're not used to it yet. So you kind of have to turn up the heat slowly to them. That's the frog system, the whole thing of, ask them to make a post, getting them moving into action, but their heart isn't really there. They're just moving into action and they don't even know that they're doing it. So those things are really important to do. But the power comes in, like that's the backbone. But the power comes in when you have people's heart, like when they are emotionally invested, not just doing actions. I still do those actions behind the scenes, and all of a sudden they wake up and their heart is there, and all of a sudden they get it. So yes, we do all those things. But if you are always looking for opportunity to find their heart, I'm sure you've all seen the difference between an ambassador that's doing the things and stuff, but they don't really, and then you have the ambassador that's fully invested. Like, they're not letting this go. Their teeth are sunken hard. um, that's what you're really looking for. And that comes from really helping them identify what this is going to be doing for them and how it aligns with where they're going in life and stuff like that. The other thing I wanted to say is I used to have a lot of the fears of bringing up Plexus and dripping Plexus and wondering how they were going to feel and if I brought it up at the right time and stuff like that. But what I really learned was it had to do with how I leave them more than how I bring something up. I used to pay piles of attention to how I brought up Plexus, and now I don't so much. I more pay attention to the conversation I have after I brought up Plexus and dripped Plexus and the attention I give after that. Because so many times I've dripped Plexus and they maybe don't respond, or they respond and it's kind of like a, not moving forward kind of thing. And then I will carry on having a conversation and then it loops back. That happens a lot. So I love what the new idea that Brooke and Emily gave me when I was in Momentum Movement in August was the whole concept of making a Plexus post. And then when you're chatting with someone, you're like, hey, did you see my post today? That sort of thing. Or like yesterday, I made a post about sending out samples because I'm going to do an Instagram event today. And I messaged a lot of people being like, hey, heads up, I'm doing a Gut Glam event in my Instagram feed tomorrow. And I'm sending out samples. And some of them, I talked to them about Plexus. Some of them, it was like the way that I was going to drip it there to see how they responded. So I'm not saying all of these steps to say that you need to not talk about Plexus until you've found out their why. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is drip Plexus, have all the conversations, but when you know how to lead a conversation, you'll find yourself instead of just happening into those conversations, you can actually know where you're going with them. It's like, they really love that, or here's something we can have in common. Let's start leading down this road and see where we go. It just is so helpful. Anyway, one more thing I wanted to do. So in this book here on the laws of connection, there's 8 things that he says you have to do. And one of them was, he calls it connect with yourself, but basically be confident. He says that people don't heed the call of an uncertain trumpet. So that's super important. And sharing Plexus and dripping Plexus comes right into that. It's like, yeah, I do Plexus. It just comes up very naturally. But I've had times in my life where I've hidden Plexus from my conversations. Like, they'll ask me what I do, and I would say something like, I am a stay-at-home mom or something, when I could have shared Plexus in that moment. I could have dripped Plexus there. But because I was shy of how they would respond and that they wouldn't want to talk to me after I shared or whatever, I would hide that, thinking that I'll bring that up a different time, when it's just best to get it out in the open as soon as possible. And it's how you lead the conversation. And then he talks about communicating with openness and sincerity. So basically giving an accurate praise or genuine compliments. So that's always a great way to connect, that whole wave, and then be like, your sourdough bread looks amazing. What's your recipe? That would be a genuine compliment and a great way to connect. And then he talks about number 3 is knowing your audience. So learning their histories and names. So when you're talking to brand new people, that's a very natural thing to do, is to just get a reference point of where they are, where you are. So those are normal beginning conversations. He says, live your message. So this is the whole idea of posting about Plexus, letting Plexus drip out of your mouth as often as it can, because that is living. We do Plexus. If we're hiding it and trying to act like we don't, and then all of a sudden bring it up, that's when it gets really awkward, because it's like, well, we do this, so. And then go to where they are. This is the whole concept of speaking their language, which we've heard this lots about, learning the MLM colors and just picking up on what their language is. Communicating, like for example, I have a lot of ranching farm people in my network, and if I talk in more traditional words like building character, tradition, things like that, that speaks their language more. It makes them feel like she gets me, because I do. So things, just being really conscientious, that word, conscientious of how they come at the world. Okay, here would be another example. Buckaroos is a type of cowboy. What is very big to them is tradition. Is hugely important to them. They do a lot of things, not because it's more productive, but because it's how grandpa did it. And it's really cool, actually, because they bring just a lot of tradition. So another big thing about them is they really, working hard is something that's really important to them. So to bring Plexus up to make it so that they don't have to work so hard is not attractive to them, because that's like in their character, is you're supposed to work really hard. And we can change that as we go, but I just don't talk in those words, because it doesn't register with them. So I need to go where they are. I don't expect them to catch up to where I am. And then focus on them, not yourself. That one we say all the time, but it's just so important. Just look at them. Believe in them. This one is so big. So it says, it's one thing to communicate to people because you believe you have something of value to say, which we all have value to say. If we have Plexus, we have value to say. We do. It's another to communicate with people because you believe they have value. Just like feel that difference. If someone comes and talks to you and they're like, I have this to offer you, that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. But if they come and talk to you because they see you have value and they're like, wow, they look at you like that and they're talking to you from that perspective, it's so different, which is obviously why when you come across someone that's sick, it's always so obvious that they need Plexus, but it's so easy to come at them from the perspective of, I have something of value to give, compared to coming at them from the perspective of, I've seen your value. I've paid enough attention to you to even know your value. So that's why sometimes there can be that reaction, just because we haven't given enough time to be able to approach them from a stronger, much stronger connecting point. And okay, then the last one, I just love this one because it really brings things to a good place. He says, people expect leaders to help them get where they want to go, but good leaders do that and more. French General Napoleon Bonaparte said, leaders are dealers in hope. Hence the hashtag Hope Dealer comes from this book. He says, this is so true. When you give people hope, you give them a future. So I just want you to be so confident in bringing up Plexus and talking about Plexus, because you are giving hope, and that's part of the law of connection, is giving hope to people. Doesn't mean they're going to take it or any of those things. That's not really, but that's part of having like a really strong connection, which then moves into the next level of leadership, which is the level 3, which is actually production. So you're not just connecting with someone, but you're actually moving them into results and going someplace. Anyway, that's all I have for you today.
Cheri, that was so good. I can totally resonate with what you were just saying about the ages dripping it and making it a part of you, because I think, oftentimes I also came from a place where
sometimes there can be this idea, right, around what we do. And so we'll default to, right, well, I'm a mom, or I'm a this, or I'm a that, because we're not really authentically proud of what we do. And I think over time we move into that becoming proud. And I was just at a coffee date with someone who I've never connected with before, a mom of a girl in our school, and she happens to be a leader within our church. And she invited me over. So I thought, like, sure. So I went over, and it was exactly what you explained. I figured she knows what I do, right? She's seen me from a distance, seen my social media. It will be of no value for me to not flow it through my conversation, because that would appear then that I am either embarrassed of it or putting it on the back burner or worried of what she would think. And so I wove it into everything we talked about, never once saying, you should do this, you need this. I just wove it into, this is part of who I am. You know, it's part of, it fulfills these certain needs of mine, right? I married a farm boy. I knew I was never moving ever again after moving my whole life. However, Plexus fulfills that need for me because I get to go on these amazing trips a few times a year. So it was that, I like the word, the dripping, because I was like, hey, that's what I did this morning. It's just the constant dripping. And it wasn't about me trying to sell her anything, but she now will have a different perspective possibly of Plexus, of network marketing in general, because she's seeing it. It's just a part of me. So I love that.
You're living that. You're living that message that you're communicating. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's that confidence in the conversations. And oftentimes I think that's why conversations stall out. And that's why I wanted to bring you on here, because I've heard you speak on this a few times now. And I think everyone here listening and all the people that are going to get to hear the recording, it's going to resonate so much, because we can feel that, like, yeah, I've totally been there. Like, I felt that feeling of stalling out or pulling back. And yet, yeah, and you get to that place and you're just so proud, and you realize, I love the value, portion, right? Like, I've really been sending out messages this week myself too on genuine compliments, not because I just want them to engage with me more, but turning it around to saying, hey, here's what I actually really value, or what you're showing me through your social media. And I think you gain the respect and the trust. And if you're confident, you gain their respect. If you waffle, like, I don't really want you to think that. I don't want you to think that I'm just trying to sell you something. Girl, you may as well throw your rankle out the door if you're starting a conversation like that. Like, if you're saying, I don't want you to think I'm trying to sell you something. Well, you just basically told them you're uncomfortable, you're not confident in what you're doing, and you're actually just trying to sell them something, right?
Yeah.
We have to practice, that confidence. And I think that just comes in time. You grow in that. I know I sure did. But yeah, anybody else have a question for Cheri, or does something resonate with you?
In light of what you just said, one other thing that I found out about myself is that I had an ideal in my mind of how I wanted people to respond to me. And I didn't want to see them respond out of that box. So if someone didn't like network marketing, well, I didn't want them to not like network marketing. So I didn't really want to hear their response. So I would try to put stuff in the forefront so that I wouldn't hear that response, like what Heidi's talking about, of saying, I don't know, I don't want you to think I'm selling you things and all that sort of stuff, was me trying to kind of actually block their honest response, because I kind of didn't want to hear exactly where they were at. But it was actually a comment Kristen made to me. She was like, when people show you who they are, believe them. And it was just one of those things. It was like, okay, I need to let people respond how they will, whether they're upset, happy. Most people, actually, I don't find are upset, but like, I haven't had an upset conversation in a really, really long time. So it's really not a concern. But let's say they were kind of grumpy or something, to let myself get to know them, let me, even though it's not nice to see someone upset and have an emotion that's not nice, to let it be there and not to take it on, but to just kind of let it fall between me and them, and just kind of like, oh, okay, so that's where you're coming from. And then it made me know how to move forward. But that was just, I just realized that insecurity for me came from me I didn't want to hear I was scared of how they viewed the world, instead of just being confident and letting them show me who they were. So it's just another one of those things that I realized about myself. I eventually got tired of not knowing what people really thought, because when you know what they really think, then you know how to help them, you know how to move them forward, you know what to do. When you don't know what they actually think, that's when you end up having a full funnel and no movement, because you don't know what anyone, like, where are you at? So I just got so, it's like, I don't care what you say. I just need to know what you are thinking. That's all I need to know. Anyway.
That's so good. And I think so much of this, at least for me, has been dependent upon my own personal growth, right? My knowing where my value is, that how they respond has nothing to do with me, being able to remove my value from whatever the outcome is, even in conversation, right? So that fear of like, what are they going to say? Or how do I tell them what I really do? Like, so much of that had to come from this place within me that the Lord was like, stop that, stop that, stop that. Of course, he wasn't quite saying it like that, but I'm just reiterating, you get the message, right? It was like, no, Lindsay, no. You're mine, I am yours, we are one, walk forward, right? And once I think we can separate our value from anything else that's outside of that, it gives us freedom to really want to know other people. And so I'm wondering your thoughts on this, Cheri, as I coach people who feel like they get stuck in conversation. You know, they've done the like, hi, I'm so-and-so, and this is my family, and tell me about yours. Like, they have a very hard time knowing where to go next in the conversation. Don't just want to be like, so I do Plexus, you know, right? Like having natural conversation with people. For me, there was a part of it that came naturally for me. There was also a part of it which I had to learn to be able to guide the conversation to places that were of value, right, to both parties. And so I'm wondering how much of this really, like, I wonder for some of these people that have had a harder time, how much of it is that they really don't know their own value. They don't know what value they add to a conversation. And so they don't really know how to grab value, how to, you know, share the value that they see in the other person. Like there's a part of this that I wonder how much of it is dependent upon us knowing that we're valuable and that we offer value. I don't know if your experience has been what you would say to that.
Yeah.
Help people.
My personal experience with that is, and I'm curious how much this is just me or if other people have this, but this was me. I had this feeling inside me that I needed to pay everyone the same attention. And for whatever reason, if a cup, imagine everyone having a cup and I have a cup. If someone's cup was really, really empty, I would, or I even had a hole in the bottom of it, it was like I would gravitate to that person and I would just pour and pour and pour and try and try and try. And I'd almost ignore the people that had fuller cups that were actually, when it came to business, way better sense for me to spend my time there. And I realized, once I realized that I wasn't really filtering my conversations very well. I was, there was just some basic things that I would come across someone's social media and I would loyally stick to their account even though they didn't communicate there, and it is very difficult to even have a conversation with them. So that's where I would start first. Like, are you actually having conversations with people that will communicate? Because if, like, you can come with confidence, but if they don't have a level of confidence, they just don't communicate. So that would be the first thing I'd cross off the list, and make sure that you're not just getting stuck in having trying to have a conversation with someone and they don't actually care to communicate back. And I used to get stuck there from some internal stuff that was causing me to be gravitated. Maybe it's because I felt like they needed my help, whatever it was. So that's the first thing. I started learning to let conversations go that just weren't going places, and just realizing that just because it's not going someplace doesn't mean that I'm doing something wrong or can't connect. Just some people just don't want to talk, and that's okay. So crossing that off first, the next thing was instead of trying to do my work so especially when it came to meeting people, when I go into a crowd of people, I naturally gravitate to people. I don't have to think about who to talk to. I just end up being beside someone and just gravitating to people, and it just kind of happens. Whereas for me online, I used to really overthink it, and I would try to figure out who to talk to. And I had to learn that it's actually the same gut feeling, that you just go talk to the people that you just naturally feel like talking to. So I started to kind of listen to that gut feeling instead of just thinking about it so much. Because I remember thinking about one person for a good 2 hours. Maybe maybe no one else ever does that, but I really overthink things at the beginning. It would take me hours to do my IPA because I was trying to figure out how to pick the right person. Once I learned to just, this is where genuine, authentic, those words, it's that feeling of, I just like this person. You don't have to try to conjure up something that you like about them. You actually feel that interests me. So I don't know if anyone else has that issue, but that's something that I had a really big issue, that I would think about people rather than just letting myself naturally get attracted to people. And once I started doing that, my IPA became much more interesting, because the people that I actually felt connected with were very different than the people I was trying to connect with. So that's another layer that I found out about myself.
I want to speak to that for a second, because I think that often when people get bogged down in a conversation, you hear people saying, I've reached out to all these people. It's just crickets everywhere. You see this in the chats all the time, right? With those that are working at building the business. And what do? There's just crickets everywhere. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. And I love what you said. And I actually picked up that similar guidance from Trisha Rieger. And we were talking one day on Instagram about 1.5 years ago. And I said, Trisha, like, you're so great on social media. Tell me about your conversations. How many are you having? What does that look like? And she says, honestly, Heidi, she says, you have to take the weight off of exactly what you said, Cheri. If people aren't responding back to you, it is okay to let it go. Because she said, when you're in this position, you're trying, like, that's exhausting emotionally when you're trying to constantly keep conversations going. I think that in this business, it's not the doing, and I always say this, and we all have different strength zones, but it's not the doing the things that makes us burn out or feel tired or lead anyone to discouragement. I would say that when things are going great, we don't mind helping organize events, starting chats, doing the things for personal growth, but it's the exhausting part comes out of exactly this. I have 15 conversations. One of them's maybe responding. The rest I'm checking in, inviting them to event, crickets, no response. That's emotionally exhausting. And we hit walls. And so Trisha said, Heidi, she's like, I send out, X number of messages a day. She's like, depends on the month. If I have a goal, I might send out 10 a day. Sometimes it might be 3 a day. But she says, if they don't respond back, I don't message a second time. And she said, because they're not interested to communicate, they're not currently ready for what maybe I want to build, develop, or offer them. And she says, all that is, she's like, it's just a process. It's not personal. It doesn't show wrong intent on my part. She's just like, but I'm here to communicate. I'm here to build a relationship. And if they don't want to, that's too heavy to carry. And she says, you can't have 35 or 40 conversations going that are all crickets. That's not life-giving. It's not hope-filled. It's not conversation. And I think, guys, if, anyone watching this, I think if you can take one thing away today, it would be let go of the pressure and the bondage of feeling like you have to keep those conversations going. If they're not going, they're not going. Move on to the next one, but stop waiting for those, 10, 15, 20 they're just not ready. And like Cheri said, they just might not want to talk, but there's people who do want to talk, and there's people who do want to have conversations, and just keep new people, right? It is a number thing. It is finding the right ones.
And just to clarify in all of that, when I'm following up about Plexus specifically, like I'm dripping Plexus, and then I invite them to Plexus, and they're like, sure. And then I'm following up. That would probably be the one area that I would do my most cricket type follow up. But all the conversations before all that is like what Heidi is talking about, like just really letting the chaff go where it goes, and just, yes, I will communicate with someone's feed a few times without them responding to me when I really, really like them. Not because I'm trying to like them, it's because I like their feed, and I feel fed watching their feed. So it's one of those things, I'm just attracted to it, and so I'll end up showing up there. Yeah, so that's okay. One more thing is that I found, I hate to talk about higher and lower quality people, just because it so easily gets confused with people having value, because everyone has high capacity, but some people only fill that capacity very small. So I would meet someone that I would be attracted to talking to, and I felt like they were already had a lot of friends, were already pretty busy with their network. Why would they pay much attention to me talking to them? So I would subconsciously scratch them off my list. And it was just so weird. I would put people on my list that I thought had time for me, and then I would scratch off people that I should have been talking to because I was like, they don't have time for me. And it was this subconscious filter, because we're filtering so much. Like when you're on Instagram, or social media, there's so much to filter because there's so many people to talk to. And I just realized my filtering system, my subconscious filtering system, was a little bit off, and it was getting me into conversations that were just dry bones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ladies, is there anything you want to add or anything you want to ask? Any resonating thoughts?
Thank you, Cheri. I just love this time. I think for me, the biggest shift happened in a lot of what you said. I started off so much thinking about, and it is my business, but thinking is my business growth and what's going to get me there. And so often I thought, well, these people need me the most, but not like who can we share and engage a life-giving relationship with. And so that shift for me turned into, okay, this is the ministry God's given me, this ministry of hope. And so like Lindsay said, none of it's personal. And I love how you said that, Heidi, it's a process. It's just part of the process. But that quote that you said by Maxwell, that when you give people hope, you give them a future, but the people have to want the future. And I've had to realize that so much for myself. And even though I love people so hard, that was the draining part for me. That's where I got to that exhausted and depleted point.
Yes.
That has to come from the Lord. And so I was able to separate myself. Okay, Margot, the Lord has used you, and now you can move on.
He's the one that loves them.
Yeah, exactly.
We feel like we're the one loving. It's no, he's still carrying them.
Yeah.
Even when they're empty. It's not my job to fill that up. He's gonna fill that up.
Yeah.
Oh, and I love what you're saying there, because that was huge for me too. And it's from this book of just really thinking as a leader. And it's I'm not here to serve everyone. I'm here to serve specific people who will then serve, because we're not just helping 10 people here that we can pour into ourselves. We're trying to help thousands of people. So we do have to be very specific with where we put our time, and just, back to what we were saying. I love what you're saying, Margaret.
No, well, thank you.
And just to caveat that, right? Someone might listen to this and think, well, are you just then starting conversations, out for a purpose and a gain, or do you truly care about people? And I think, of course, we truly care about people, right? But like you said, Cheri, we only have so much time in a day, and we have families, we have spiritual needs, we have homes to take care of. And so the conversations we're having need to go those both ways. It needs to be life-giving for them, but also needs to be life-giving for us. And I love the follow the gut feeling. And I think, I mean, has that really ever led us wrong in any area of life? You know, I think you just, you know, when you know, and if you feel like you're literally dragging a conversation, you are, and it's not life-giving.
Yeah, it's true. Okay.
You are. So let's just be honest about that. And it's not personal. That's just the thing. It's not personal. It doesn't mean we don't love people well, but they need to be receptive, right? They need to want that for them, and we can't be their everything. So yeah.
Okay, that brought up one more thing. I think this will be the last thing. Okay, so the law of sacrifice and the law of priorities is part of leadership. Where putting 80% of your time into that 20 is what will get you the most reward, because you're pouring into leaders. And John Maxwell talks about that. Pour into leaders because they will pour into more people. The next law is the law of sacrifice, which means you're always going to gain, you're going to lose something. And this was powerful me, even when it came to working with my team. I felt guilty I wanted to help everyone. And the bigger my team got, the less control I had to help everyone, because I can't. And I felt guilty that I was supposed to be helping everybody. And then I all of a sudden realized that by not prioritizing people, I was still prioritizing people. And so if I chose to talk to this person, it meant that I wasn't talking to this person. So even though I had this whole idea of I wanted to be there for everyone and help everyone equally and all these sorts of things, you can't. You won't. You are prioritizing. You're going to pick someone to pour into, and you can't pour into everyone. Mm-hmm. So just that realizing that if you're talking to that person, that means you're not talking to that person. And so what does that mean? So that whole, there is going to be, you are prioritizing and picking whether you like to face that or not. And that was something I didn't want to face at first, but then I had to start. When I started realizing that this is how I meant to work, that I meant to pour into this person and they'll pour into that person, I guess it actually came out of pride, feeling like I was the one that had to help everyone, instead of realizing that's actually not my load to carry. So you can stop that. Anyway. Okay, now one more thing. I can't leave this conversation without saying this, because this is my most recent thing this week. I've known and prayed to God a long time. And I've known to pray to God first. Not when you feel like you need help or when you're like, no one's talking to me, God help me. It's talk before. So my coach, I have a coach, and he said this to me this week. He said, if you're overwhelmed, it means you haven't asked for help first. Specifically asking God for help first. It could be delegating to other people as well, but asking God for help first. And just I used to kind of mentally think of that as another thing on my to-do list, that before I do this, I need to ask God first. And it was like this another to-do list thing. And my coach, he was like, that's the wrong perspective. We got to bring you over on this side. He's like, you're the princess of the king, and a princess doesn't go ride the horse and the horse loses his shoe and she has to figure out how to get that shoe on that horse. She doesn't even worry about that. She just takes it back to the stall. Next morning, there's a shoe on it. It was looked after by the king and his people, right? And so just that mindset of, instead of picturing myself as fully responsible to make all these things come together, it's like, no, I'm doing the things and God's carrying all of that bottom stuff, all that stuff that I used to think it was my job. It's like, no, it's not your job. So just asking God for help, and just really, I don't know, the gut feeling, those things I just found are so just so big, I guess. Just releasing that whole burden and weight of trying to do things just so. That's all I got for real this time.
One more thing. Guys, let's let you, Cheri, thank you so much for your time, and just, I love listening to you. I mean, I could spend all afternoon sitting here, as probably everybody else could. Yeah, thank you so much. There's so much value in that. I feel super encouraged. It's just a really great reminder. You know, I think we all need those reminders, and it's so nice to hear from others in our situation how we can just bless each other and share, like, hey, right? Like, you're not alone. This is normal. This happens. Here's how we can work through it. So, yeah, I love that we can all do that for each other. Thank you so much, Cheri. I know your days are so busy,
Thank
but
you.
we really
you.
appreciate you.
Yes.
I loved being here. You guys are so fun.
Awesome.
You're the best.